artists. Today I'm going to be teaching you some tricks about watercolor. I'm going to show you two techniques today for how to do watercolors. So the first thing I'm going to be teaching you today is not only how to start with watercolors, some things to remember when you're doing watercolors, but how to do wet on dry watercolors. So with my watercolor palette, my paints are completely dry. They're dry and sticky. I'm not getting any color right now. I have a paper towel and I have my water cup. When I go to start, first thing I always want to do is, no matter what I'm doing, I always want to make sure I've washed out my brush. You never know what could have gotten left on the brush. You always want to wash out the brush first. Alright, I'm going to pick out a color. Let's see here. I'm going to get my watercolors wet. When I go get my watercolors wet, I'm just going to put some water right on the watercolors to get it all wet. This first word, wet on dry, wet, in this case refers to the watercolor. The watercolor, I'm going to get it wet. If it's sticky, it won't work. If you feel like it's sticky and dry, it won't work. I need wet watercolor. All right. The dry part is going to be on dry paper. Wet watercolor on dry paper. When I do wet watercolor on dry paper, I can create things like lines or very specific areas of color. If I want a new color, I need to wash out my paintbrush. I do not want purple in yellow. I do not want purple watercolor in my yellow watercolor. So I need to make sure I wash out my brush really well, and then I can wipe it on my paper towel to make sure there's no color. All right, I'm going to move on to a new color here. I think I'm going to do this turquoise color. I had to get it wet first. If I'm just using just turquoise, I don't have to wash out my water cup or wash out my paintbrush. I just have to wash out my paintbrush when I switch colors. So I can create fun lines or sections of colors. Like if I'm creating a heart, I can do very controlled brush strokes inside to get just a shape or just one area. Okay, I'm going to switch colors, so I need to wash out my brush really, really well, and I need to wipe it on my paper towel to make sure there's no color. When I do, this is called wet on wet or wet in wet, is the first thing I'm going to do is get just plain water and just put water on my paper. I don't want to put so much water that the paper becomes soggy, but I do want to put enough water to get it wet. All right, I'm going to pick out a color here. I think I want this red purple. It's already wet, so I am going to just put this into my wet paper. Look at that. It's like magic. It spreads out. This is called, these thin areas where it's really light like this and it spreads out, it's called a wash. I can even do colors into other colors. So I would wash out my brush again, make sure it's all clean. And if I want this blue, I feel like it's a little sticky here, so I need to get some more water in it, because I'm going to do wet on wet. Wet watercolor on wet paper, and here we go. I can spread the watercolor right in. I can put it right up next. Now look, when I do wet on wet, the blue is like moving over to other sides. I can also blend these together. All I would do is take a little bit of water, and I would just blend the two colors together to make a new color. Just like so. Washes like this are really good for big areas of color. Big areas of color. Remember, I need to make sure that I wash out my brush really, really well. I don't want blue in another section, or I don't want anybody else to get blue on their paper. Happy watercoloring!